Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. It is time for a little Friday matinee where the boys here talk about Inter Miami's academy because for the first time in over 2 years, Inter Miami has signed one of their academy players to a homegrown contract. Dániel Pínter, who we got our first look at last season, he had a little bit of a cameo. Gets his first team homegrown contract. He is the first player to do that since January 9th, I believe, of 2024, where Tyler Hall and Israel Boatwright were given homegrown contracts. And so we thought, let's talk about the academy. Some other things going on with former academy players. And then maybe at the end of this episode, we can talk about the drama that is Tristan Blackman and our center back situation. But before all of that, I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. How are you feeling on this lovely, lovely Friday lunchtime?
I'm feeling great. We always usually do it either on the weekends or in the middle of the week. So the Friday time slot is always different. It's new, it's fresh. So if anyone new is watching, welcome to the Drive Pink Dialogue. It's a bunch of bozos talking about all things Inter Miami, the greatest team in the MLS. And we've got a fun episode planned out for us. I always enjoy talking about the youth. I think the youth is what makes a club flow, and it talks about the health of a club. And I'm very happy that Inter Miami finally, after almost a year and a half, 2 years, has signed somebody from the academy to a first team contract. Very happy for Dániel Pínter. We can talk more about that. But other than that, all going well. Looking forward to the weekend. How are you?
I will say I do feel a little guilty and maybe feel like apologizing for our last episode because a little behind the scenes, we did not have much planned for that episode. And we thought, let's just go live and wing it. And I ended up watching it back and thinking, man, I don't even know what I'm talking about. So thank you for coming back to us after that. And if you did listen to it, I apologize. Sork tried his best to keep us on track, and I thought you did a lot.
I had the best time. It was such a good episode.
No, dude, I love this. And it makes me so sad that for a period of time, Inter Miami had felt like they were moving away from their academy. And what was one of the bright spots for Inter Miami 18 months ago, where they had the best young core of academy graduates in the entire MLS. When you think about Kremaski and David Ruiz and Noah Allen and Ian Frey, like that was as good of a core group of players as any team could produce in the MLS at one given time. To not following up on that, and it did feel in some ways like it was part of the regime change that a new coach and front office came into power or came into responsibility, and maybe that wasn't a priority for them, and so those players and those kids coming through did not get those sort of first team opportunities we may have expected a year or two earlier. And so I do hope now that Javier Mascherano has gotten settled in, he understands his team. Hopefully, he has a better understanding of the academy now that he's had a whole year of a chance to kind of get to know them and watch them. And then the front office is sort of on the same page that Inter Miami hopefully is coming back to a point where they're bringing these first team kids through, because South Florida, one of the most talent-rich areas in the country, there will always be high-quality players coming through at every age group. And while we may have lost one or two or three
big names
because
or
of
promising
this gap,
names,
you can live with that because there's going to be so many more kids coming through as long as it's only a 1 year blip or an 18-month blip. If you get back to it, it becomes sustainable again.
And I think we should caveat this conversation because it felt like outside looking in that Inter Miami was not necessarily prioritizing its academy. Now, behind the scenes, what was happening, we've heard a few murmurs, some conversations, but you can't always know what the reality is. So we should mention that from the outside looking in, it looked like Inter Miami was prioritizing bringing in the big names, making sure that their first team is filled with the right quality and talent that we need to succeed right now. And I wouldn't blame them for having that priority, but you're right. The concern was that they were moving away from the model of trusting the youth, developing the talent in the academy, bringing them up into the first team. And for a year and a half, we didn't see anyone actually make that leap. Now, the one question that somebody could ask would be maybe the talent was just not ready. Yeah, that could have been the case. We don't know how some of these players train behind the scenes. We don't know what the prioritization is behind the scenes on how players are performing, how they're developing. So yeah, that could be the case, but it's heartening to see that someone like Dániel Pínter is once again being brought into the first team, this time on a full term basis. And I do think now that the first team feels a little bit more settled, and as you said, Javi Marciano has been able to um, put his mark on the squad somehow and settle into life in South Florida. We might just see a little bit more impetus and uh, input into the academy once again. And I hope that we get a few more big names coming up through the academy, like we did with Ian Frey, like we did with Noah Allen, like we did with Tomasi.
Miami King says in the chat that after this, maybe it seems there might not be any more new swinger/striker signings until the summer. We're going to talk about Dániel Pínter now and what he profiles as, which is a striker/winger who can kind of play across the front line. And now I'm thinking, courtesy of Miami King for the mention, that we should profile him as a swinger. That's his position, a striker.
I actually
winger,
like that name.
Swinger.
Is that a football term? I think we could maybe make it one
before just now.
So Miami King, full credit to you for bringing out this new term, swinger.
Yeah, no. Back to your point, like it just felt because it happened during a transition in leadership at the club that it feels like they weren't prioritizing it. And if it was actually that there was a kid or two who maybe should have been the players to come through that they didn't feel was good enough, that's okay, as long as it's only like a 18-month thing, 1 year,
Yeah,
18 months
I
thing.
agree.
So we were worried, I think, about the philosophy of the club and what they were choosing to prioritize. And if it ends up being, well, actually the one or two kids who we thought were going to get to that level just didn't quite take the next step, then that I think
That's
I feel
okay.
much better about.
Yeah.
Specifically about Dániel Pínter. He was not the kid in Inter Miami's academy that people were paying a ton of attention to at this position. For years, there was a young man named Brian Destin, who was like that elite, high-level athlete that people kind of projected into being this player where maybe he would get that first-team contract and become a part of Inter Miami. He's no longer at Inter Miami. He went to Europe and signed a contract in somewhere in Europe. I want to say Slovakia, maybe Croatia. Anyways, Dániel Pínter instead is the guy that made the jump. Now, I want to be clear. This is not a player that everyone has thought of since he was 14 years old, that has been on all the lists and getting all the youth national team call-ups since he was like some prodigy. This is a player that actually it's been the last 12 months that he's popped up on people's radar, and then he started to get a couple U.S. youth national team call-ups, obviously impressed behind the scenes enough to be the one young player all season that was given a chance with the first team. And so he's not a guy we talked a ton about or thought a ton about until the last few months, and yet here he is being the one breakthrough candidate. I kind of like that because as a prospect, it means he has helium. He's sort of blooming as we speak. I don't want to say late bloomer because he's only 18, but he's not the guy that at 15 we thought was going to be a superstar that kind of just took every right step. He's now taking the right steps and kind of blossoming. So that kind of makes me think things are clicking for him, and maybe we're going to get a player over the next year or two that a year or two ago no one projected or thought would be here. So A, congratulations to Dániel. B, I'm pretty excited about the sort of trajectory of what he's going through right now.
Yeah, and it almost seems like the coaching staff has some level of trust in him as well, because at some point when he was brought in to the first team squad last season, he came on ahead of Santi Morales. Now, I know maybe the coaching staff did not want to waste the opportunity of actually having brought him up, and they, I believe, only have 2 or 3 opportunities to do that. So they wanted to give him minutes, but he did get opportunities in the first team last season, and it looked like the coaching staff really enjoyed what he showed them in training. And hopefully this is the season that he can develop behind the scenes even more, playing with the likes of Messi, playing with the likes of Rodrigo de Paul, all the big name players. He's going to learn so much. And you talk about having helium. I think this is going to be his big year of development. So I'm really excited to see what he actually does. I don't expect him to start too many games. I don't expect him to get a lot of minutes. But if we see a couple of glimpses of him, I hope they're good glimpses, and I hope we enjoy watching him play for the first team this time around.
So officially a swinger, right? We're going back with that
Officially a swinger. I think the profiling has to be that. He's an out and out striker, but given that he's still young, he's 18, he's not necessarily like big or tall. He's 5'11. He's got the speed. He can work on the wings and play as a striker as well. So I do think that swinger profile is what suits him best. And often at times, I think a lot of these young players tend to play a little bit more on the wings side when they're developing, and then as they grow into their body, as they start to learn the ins and outs of being a winger, they can be put into that striker role and develop more as an out and out striker. So I think for his development as well, maybe playing more minutes as a winger might be helpful than just being an outright striker for now.
Well, listen, he is number 2 on the depth chart at striker, right?
He
As
is
of this moment. Today,
maybe number
Allende,
3
not
after
official.
Allende.
Well, Allende not official yet. Hasn't been announced by the club, and while we are clearly expecting that to happen, as of training tomorrow, whenever they get training, he'll be right behind Luis Suarez as the second number 9 on the list. So, again, congratulations to him. I think he's young and he has the tools to play as a winger. He has, I think, maybe an instinct to play as a striker that will be really interesting to see how it develops. Played about 1,400 minutes last year in MLS Next Pro, which is the Academy League. And he had, I think, 12 goal contributions, 9 goals, 3 assists. Again, this is like a guy that I think is blossoming up people's radars, and clearly is on the U.S. Youth National Team radar. 18 years old, so he's eligible for the next U20 World Cup, which for me is how my brain works for teenagers and where they're at in their development and what the expectations should be. 2 years ago, well, rather, Kramaski just played in the 2025 U20 World Cup. So this is a guy that's 2.5 years behind where Kramaski is right now, and maybe right where Kramaski was getting his breakout and Noah Allen was getting his breakout. He's sort of on the same timeline as those guys. So, yeah, I love the helium, and I really am excited to see what he might be able to do. What are our expectations for him? What do you think?
I think they should be low.
Because
they shouldn't be.
Let's pause for a second.
Yeah.
The last group of signings they made from the first team were Santi Morales, Tyler Hall, and Israel Boatwright. Boatwright's had some injuries. He had an ACL tear in 2024, and so maybe his clock slowed down a little bit because of that. Santi Morales has gotten a couple minutes last year, but was, I think, primarily still an academy player, a B-team player, and so is Tyler Hall. But those guys were signed by the previous regime. And so it's possible that Javier Mascherano doesn't rate them enough to give them playing time, or maybe he feels like they still need to develop more. But this kid is a guy that Javier Mascherano likes and respects and wants to be a part of the first team, and the front office, clearly there's alignment on that. So I don't necessarily think, looking at the minutes Santi Morales and Israel Boatwright and Tyler Hall got, is necessarily a great indicator of what we might get from Dániel Pínter.
I will start with this. I think for Santi Morales, it's a little bit of a struggle because of the position that he plays.
I agree.
I think he's a brilliant talent. I would, at this point in time, place him at a higher rung as compared to Pínter. I think Santi Morales could potentially start a few games for any other MLS team, but Inter Miami's talent level is so high that he has to compete against the likes of, Lionel Messi, Silvetti, Baltazar to actually get those minutes ahead of them.
It's also the positioning for Morales, where I think he could, he's primarily a number 10, but I think he could also play as maybe like a high winger just to get him some minutes. But with the way Inter Miami's set up in a 4-4-2 where you had a big defensive role, it wasn't really a great fit for him. So I think for Morales, it has been more about player fit with what we've done than actual player talent.
Exactly.
But I don't think Pinter's going to have that problem because, some people have said he's skinny, but he is tall and he is, I think, more athletic, especially over long range. So I think he will be able to play, at least in certain minutes, that wide midfield role if Inter Miami does end up going to that.
So here's what I was getting at as well, right? With Inter Miami, we don't necessarily have too much depth in our striker position. And striker is such a role, if you're playing him as a number 9, that the measuring stick and the level of analysis and scrutiny is all by goals. It's not as much of, is he defending well? Is his positioning good? Is he contributing with assists? Is he doing a lot of the holistic aspects well? With Santi Morales, as you mentioned, you're also looking at his defensive side. How does he fit into the profile? With Pínter, he could easily get a lot more minutes this season in the 88th, 90th minute, where he plays for like 5-10 minutes at the end of the game. If we're looking for like putting bodies up top, getting like a player up top who can do a bit of running, who can do a bit of pressing in the 85th, 86th minute when the team has all but finished the game off. Or alternatively, I don't know if he'd be brought on to try and get a goal, but maybe when you need a little bit more legs up top, when you don't want to change your midfielders, when you don't want to change around too much with the formation, just put a number 9 out there who can do the running, who can be a little bit of a menace to the defenders, and maybe he can get a few shots off. I think those kind of minutes would be easier for Pínter to get than in any other position. And that's why I won't be surprised if he actually does end up getting more minutes than someone like Tyler Hall did in defense last season or Santi Morales did in that number 10 midfield role. Striker is a bit of a different one. And I think there's opportunity for him, especially now that we only have out and out Luis Suarez, our number 9. That could all be completely undone depending on what formation we play. If Tadeo Allende is used as a number 9, if Messi is a false 9, then I think Pínter falls further down the pecking order. But I think at this point in time, I think he may get more minutes than we expect. And you made a good point. This is signed by Javier Mascherano. So maybe he's seen something and he wants to use him in a certain way.
Yeah, I do want to just reemphasize that point that group of Morales, Boatwright, and Tyler Hall haven't really seen the minutes because, well, we don't know why per se, but I do think there is more impetus on Javier Mascherano and the coaching staff to get Pínter opportunities because he's their guy. So I wouldn't necessarily use those 3 as like a guide of what we might expect from Pínter.
Exactly.
Last year, Alan Obando played like 300 minutes, 250 to 300 minutes, 7 appearances. Like, that feels totally up for grabs. And if you're going to bring in another striker, like, I don't think you'd bring in another striker just for that, to give you what Alan Obando gave you last year. So I kind of don't expect them to bring another striker in. Allende can play there if you have some sort of serious injury. Obviously, Suarez can play there. And Suarez has been not a guy that you have to worry about injuries for because he'll play through them. And then you can always go to sort of Messi as a false 9. So I think, like, in terms of guys in case you need depth, in case there's an injury or whatever, or like you're kind of covered at striker for right now. And then if you're just talking about let's get minutes at the end of the game or when we rotate and we don't care that much about this specific game, like I think Pínter is going to be up for that, in my opinion. So like I think he could get a couple hundred minutes this year. That wouldn't surprise me.
Especially in the first half of the season, before they bring in whoever they want to bring in the DP position. And I think that kind of cements the theory that we put forward, that Inter Miami is going to look for a DP number 9 in the summer, not right now. I think Pínter is going to be the backup striking option in case Inter Miami struggles with injuries or needs more depth in that position. I'm not sure whether the right wing role, the swinger role that we've talked about, is still out of contention getting in this transfer window. Maybe we do get one, but I think it's less likely now. We might just call it quits after the central midfield / Baltazar signing.
Well, let's talk about how this affects the roster, because I'm sure some people are curious. The way the MLS roster rules work is that you have technically 2 separate rosters. One that is player number 1 through 20, which is your senior team roster, and one that is 21 through 30, which is your quote-unquote supplemental roster. Inter Miami's supplemental roster includes players that are either on sort of the MLS minimum salary, players that are homegrowns, and players that are super draft picks. So over the last couple of years, guys like Noah Allen, Ian Frey, Yannick Bright, Leo Alfonso, David Ruiz, Benjamin Kramaski, those guys have all been on the supplemental roster. That doesn't in any way affect your senior team roster from a cap salary perspective. Dániel Pínter is going to sign a homegrown deal, which will put him on the supplemental roster. So he won't affect the cap at all. It's just a player you can have. And Inter Miami has a bunch of openings on that roster because guys like Noah Allen, Yannick Bright, Ian Frey, and David Ruiz over the last year have gotten new contracts that will now put them on the senior team roster. So this doesn't affect Inter Miami's ability to go get a U22 player. It doesn't affect their ability to go sign more international players. It doesn't affect their ability to do anything. This is a totally separate roster construction that doesn't impact Inter Miami at all. And so if anyone was worried about that, you can not. Yeah, I'm just excited, man. And I do think this will tell us a lot about how we're feeling about Javier Mascherano and his ability, because this is like his first guy he's identified. You know what I mean? So I guess I do have higher expectations or hopes than I have at any point prior to his official signing.
How much of this is Javier Mascherano and how much of this is the general management and coaching structure of Inter Miami saying that Pínter is someone we want to look at for the first team and see how he gels in and how he fits in? I don't know how much credit to give Javier.
I think it's Mascherano.
Yeah.
I mean, it's collective. I don't want to cut them out, but I guess one of the things that this front office could have looked at is Inter Miami signed kids to homegrown deals too early. And some of those guys didn't pan out. Now, because those guys are on a different portion of the roster, it doesn't really affect your ability to do other things. So I'm always in favor of signing the kid and then working it out later than losing the kid and never getting a chance. So I can see the front office being a little bit more conservative on who they give these contracts to, and that's certainly what it's felt like over the last 2 years. What I will say is Inter Miami has some really, really high-level, guys that are thought to be really high-level prospects that are like in that 15, 16 age group that are going to be making their MLS Next Pro debut either this year or in the next 18 months. So, again, if Inter Miami's going back to starting to think about bringing these guys through, I think that's a tremendous step in the right direction for the club.
Yeah, I think it'll give hope to some of the younger kids coming through the academy that there's still a pathway. And I think a club always needs to have a pathway for some of these young players to allow them the opportunity to break through. Not all of them are going to turn out to be Ian Frey or Benjamin Kramaski, but the opportunity needs to be there and the kids need to see that there's an opportunity there. And I think the health of a club always is determined by its academy. So the fact that we bring in somebody from the academy into the first team on a regular basis is good for the club overall. So very excited by this prospect, and I hope Dániel Pínter has a good stint in the first team.
Yeah, I think we have sort of an unofficial rule on our podcast to not mention anyone's name until they at least make their MLS Next Pro debut. But I will just say there's a couple strikers that are really, really highly thought of, that are 16 turning 17 and I guess 15 turning 16 this year. And there's also a really high-level goalkeeper that people think really highly of. So I guess that's enough of a tease. Saur, let's talk about some of these other academy kids that we've mentioned over the last 20 minutes that haven't really gotten their big opportunity. And let's project what they might be in 2026. Santi Morales has been the closest, I would say, to opportunities. Clearly made his debut. I think had 5 or 6 appearances last year. All of them came in the last 10 minutes, so I don't want to make too much of it. Did not get his first start with the club. I will say I do feel like the way Inter Miami played last year was not conducive to his skill set, and I think that was probably a big portion of it. But I don't know. Do you feel like we're going to get more from Santi Morales this year, or do you think it's going to have to wait until we have sort of a structure change in the formation and how we play?
I think it has to do a little bit of both. It will have to wait until there's a structural change, until we change the formation. But I also think the phase that Inter Miami is in right now, in terms of what they want to do, chasing the CONCACAF Champions Cup, chasing those glory trophies. I think for someone like Santi Morales, there's not that much opportunity for growth, and these are important prime growing years for him. So I'm not sure if we actually get too much more from Santi Morales than we did last season in terms of minutes, in terms of appearances. I have a feeling that he's going to be more important as a player for Inter Miami in the post Messi era, and that almost makes me think perhaps a loan or an opportunity somewhere to begin with might be easier for him to develop. But I think for Inter Miami next season, I expect him to stay on. Well, maybe not, because I, in my bingo, predicted that Inter Miami moves him on, whether that's on a permanent basis or a loan, we'll see. But I don't think we're going to get too much more from him, especially with the talent that we have in those positions. There's so much competition for the spots that Santi Morales could potentially fit into, let alone the number 10. So I think he's going to have limited minutes next season as well, similar to what we saw this season.
It's tough to talking about loans because, the only real place you can loan someone is to the USL Championship. And
Yeah.
I'm not really sure how high that level is even compared to MLS Next Pro, where in the MLS Next Pro, which is the Academy League, you are at least prioritized. Your development is prioritized. And so while there's probably some bit of a talent advantage at the USL Championship level, you lose the club investment in you and getting to be the sort of key player that everything goes through. So I'm not actually sure it's a big development opportunity to go to the USL Championship. And so it is tough because I agree with you. I think Santi Morales is the type of guy that has played many 2.5 seasons at the MLS Next Pro level, doesn't really need to do that anymore. He needs to be getting some professional level experience against adults, but I don't know if there's like a league or opportunity for him that makes a ton of sense, because he's also not ready to go to a different MLS club and be like a star for them either. So it's tough.
And he's in a difficult place as well, because he needs to play to grow. And he's not going to get the minutes here in the first team as much as he needs. So it's a really difficult position for Santi Morales. And I think he's good enough for Inter Miami in a few years. Is just, how do you approach the situation, and do you give him more time to try and prove himself? Because the only reason he will be able to earn minutes is by putting in good performances, and that would equate to maybe assists, maybe a few goals, maybe some spark off the bench. So we'll see. You never know.
I do think there's something to this where like you kind of just got to throw them out there and see what it looks like. And we saw Santi Morales last year, and it never looked like he's in over his head or he's sinking. Like he looked fine. He looked ready for more minutes. And so, again, I hope that's maybe something Mascherano kind of develops this year. Is it's the 82nd minute, we're up by 2 goals. Throw in the 19-year-old and give him an opportunity instead of leaving to bench, like only making 3 subs. Go ahead and give a kid 6 extra minutes, because I thought there was plenty of times last year where he chose not to do that. So I hope this year we see that more.
Do you think the fact that we won the MLS Cup sort of puts less pressure this season on the MLS, and maybe in the regular season games we get to see some of those moments where in the 80th minute, 85th minute, 75th minute, we're up by 3 goals, 2 goals, and Javier Mascherano takes the risk of bringing on, if not a couple, then at least one of the youth players? I think there's merit to that, because the MLS this year is going to be slightly different now that we've actually won it. The pressure is off, as so to speak. Doesn't say that we won't have to perform or get the results, but I do think there's some risk that you can take with some of these younger players, at least in the regular season, especially while you're chasing the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Yes, I think there's merit to that idea, and that is what I hope happens this year. I don't think we saw anything from last season that indicates that will happen. So I want to keep it as hope. I don't want to give anyone false hope, but like I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, I think it's something that we should be sort of prioritizing more next season. What about the other two kids, Tyler Hall and Israel Boatwright? Because Hall is 19 now. Israel Boatwright turns 21 this year. Israel Boatwright played games for Inter Miami in 2023 before Messi got here and looked the part, like is a good enough athlete. And again, it was maybe 150 minutes, so I don't want to overemphasize what he was, but he looked like a competent MLS player in those 150 minutes and a professional level athlete. And we kind of haven't seen him since. He tore his ACL in 2024 and was sort of injury riddled in 2025. But it is getting to a point where we kind of have to figure out what he's going to be. And if not, give him a chance to go build his career elsewhere. I think of Edison Azcona as like the prime candidate that I think about for Inter Miami, where sign him, give him a chance. If it doesn't work, there will be opportunities to help him pursue his career, and he's doing a great job in the USL Championship now. So I wonder at what point we're going to actually give him opportunities, and then if not, maybe it is time to give him a loan to the USL Championship to give him an opportunity to like establish himself as a professional first-team player. You're on mute.
I was saying if this is the season that he gets an opportunity, then it's the last one for him to break through into the first team squad. I think if it doesn't happen this season, then you need to be fair to him and allow him to pursue opportunities elsewhere and get those minutes that he needs to develop into the player that he's eventually going to be.
Yeah, but also like give him the minutes then. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
exactly. Exactly.
It's gonna be tough because he's a right back, and I don't necessarily think he's got center back flexibility. Maybe he does, but we never saw that in his 150 minutes. And obviously with Ian Frey and Facundo Moura, that's not going to be a place where there's just like going to be obvious minutes for him, like there might be at striker for Dániel Pínter. So I agree with you. I think like at some point you have to give him an opportunity, but that will also depend on his health. As far as giving an opportunity, let's go to Tyler Hall because he's been a locked-in starter for the MLS Next Pro team. We saw him last year in the preseason. He's quick. He is short. We've also seen a different short, quick defensive center back thrive at Inter Miami over the last 14 months. This is a kid I think they have to give opportunities to or move him on.
I have more hope for Tyler Hall than I have for Israel Boatwright, just because I think he can play a couple of positions in that back line. But he has some skill sets that could eventually come really good. But again, give him opportunity or move him on. So I almost feel like the conversation is very similar in this case as well. He's going to grow. I think there's a player there, and from what we've seen, he can actually do a job as a backup if need be. But Inter Miami is eventually going to sign another center back, whether it's now, whether it's in the summer, not sure. But we are probably going to bring in someone which is going to create a depth issue for Tyler Hall to break into that position. So I'm not sure how or where he gets those minutes.
Let me ask you a question. The last two seasons, Inter Miami signed him to a first-team contract January 9th, 2024. Each of the last two seasons, they've loaned him back to the B team, which means he wasn't eligible to play for the A team. And they made that decision in preseason. I don't think you can do that again.
No,
it's we've never seen him on the bench. Like he obviously hasn't made his debut for the first team in a competitive environment. We've never had him on the bench. Like he hasn't even got the opportunity. And I think now that he's got 2+ years at the MLS Next Pro level, like he's maxed out what he's going to get from that.
Exactly.
It's time. And so this year, if they loan him to the B team, I'll be pretty disappointed. And if that's the case, then I think you're going to have to also start looking at giving him an opportunity to move to MLS Next Pro. I'm sorry, to the USL Championship to get a loan, just to give him an opportunity to sort of prove himself. He is 19, a little bit younger than Boatwright, so maybe it's not quite as urgent. But I just think you can't do again what you did last 2 years, where you kind of just never at the beginning of the season you decide we're not going to use him all year.
Yeah.
You have to give him an opportunity to grow into a role.
And at what point is it diminishing returns for the player as well, right? I think he has maximized what he can do in the second team. And for him, I think it's the right time to either find a new team for himself where he gets challenged more, or at least given the opportunity to try and break into the first team. Give him
And
time on the bench.
let me be clear. That could mean 250 minutes this year with the A team,
Yeah, of
and he's
course.
on the bench 25 game. Like he's an actual
Hmm.
option 25 game. I'm not suggesting he needs to become a
No, a
1,000 minute
starter. Yeah,
player. Like I just need something to show that he's on the right track. And I like him. I like what I've seen from him, and I watched him with the
exactly.
U.S. youth national teams. Like I like what I see from him, and I want him to get an opportunity in Miami. It just at some point you have to be fair to him. Do you think we're going to get that this year from those guys, those four?
I don't think the sample size is big enough for us to be confident in that. I think Javier Mascherano tends to stick to the players that he trusts, especially when the going gets tough. So I am skeptical that they'll get the minutes that they need to grow into the players that they are. So short answer, probably not.
It is, just to remain optimistic, like you mentioned a couple minutes ago, if you think of the MLS now as, I'm sorry, if you think of Javier Mascherano now as an MLS Cup champion, he's a winner. Maybe he doesn't have the same pressure he had
Pressure,
last
yeah.
year, and maybe he can start to sort of dive into
Experiment.
other aspects of being a coach, which would include giving young guys opportunities. And by the way, do you know the best environment to give young guys opportunities in?
When you're champions.
A very good winning team. You don't want to
Yeah.
have to put kids into a terrible team and have
No.
them have all that pressure. So if you can give them opportunities on a good winning team with cohesion, that's
When
the
the
best
vibes are
time.
high. Yeah.
Exactly, that's the best time, and that's where Inter Miami is now. Okay, let's first of all, Kareem with the super sticker. Thank you so much for that. He says give him Leo Alfonso's minutes. That might be where Dániel Pínter gets some of his
Yeah.
minutes this year. Sort of all of Leo Alfonso, all of Alan Obondo's minutes, and you kind of create something for Dániel Pínter. Okay, a couple other notes or things I think worth talking about. Noah Allen mentioned over the last couple of days as a guy that has been talked about in European circles. Tom Bogart had a tweet about this, a couple others. Panathinaikos in Greece, and obviously he's representing the Greek youth national team, and so he wouldn't count, I guess, as a foreign player for them, I would imagine. Ghent in Belgium, the other club, and a couple other European clubs. This is a player that has grown, and he's from the academy, and I think is something to remind ourselves about as we talk about some of these other young kids. This feels like the right next step. Don't think it's going to happen. I'm very confident it's not going to happen this window, but I think as soon as the summer, we might be having the conversations of some players on their way to bigger and better things. And I think that is coming soon for Noah Allen. And now it's starting to be reported as he's a guy that they're watching.
Yeah, you used the term helium earlier in the podcast. I think having air in your wings is the perfect definition for Noah Allen because he has grown exponentially from what kind of a player we thought he would be. I think he cemented his role as a first team centre back starter over the course of a year and a half. He deserves all the recognition that he's getting. There's obviously no smoke without fire. So I do think there's interest coming in from a lot of these teams in Europe. But I agree with you. I think Inter Miami's plan is to keep him at least until the summer because otherwise, we're going to have to go and look for a backup left back, and it creates some instability in our defensive setup. I do think he is eventually going to move on as early as next summer, but this is maybe some of these
This
teams
summer.
positioning themselves. Yes, this summer. But this is, I think, some of these teams positioning themselves early for that eventuality. I don't think he leaves in this window, but honestly, all the recognition that's coming his way, all the interest that's coming from some of these teams is well deserved because he has been nothing short of spectacular over the last year and a half, 2 years, in the way that he's grown into the player that he is today.
And I was pretty nervous for Noah because he is best at this very moment, his best position as a center back. And I think he's got tools and talent to be a left back as well. But as we're talking right now, his best position as a left-sided center back, and he's pretty small. to be a center back. And I do think some teams will say, if you're under 6 foot, we're not going to consider you for this position. And other teams will say, if you're not 5'10", we're not going to consider you for this position. And Noah Allen, who's 5'7", maybe 5'8", is certainly not the profile or build of a center back. And I was worried that teams would kind of cross him off the list early because of that, which would make me sad because he's clearly good enough as a player. And so to hear
Absolutely.
teams that have gone past that first stage and they're seriously considering him, that makes me pretty excited, whether it's as a left back or as a left-sided center back. I think his future is going to be in Europe, and I think he deserves that, and that's pretty cool. And again, I think he's the quintessential example of what an academy player expectation should be for players coming out of the Inter Miami Academy. So when we're thinking about Dániel Pínter, like you go back to 2022 and Noah Allen starts the opening game of the season for Inter Miami under Phil Neville, but he still spends much of his season with the B team. And 2023, he starts to get some more real opportunities, and Franco Negri gets his ACL injury, and so Noah Allen becomes a starter for a 10, 15 game sample. And then Jordi Alba comes in, and he kind of goes back to being a reserve, rotation player. 2024, kind of the same thing. He's kind of a rotation player until the very end. He finally gets his breakout. And then in 2025, he becomes what I would consider like a legitimate starter for Inter Miami. So you're talking about a 4-year progression of him being a prospect, getting a couple opportunities. Then year 2, a rotation piece that gets opportunities and comes in when someone gets hurt. Year 3, no one really gets hurt, and so he is just a rotation piece. And then at the end of year 3, he kind of breaks through to become a player that in year 4 we can really count on. In year 4, he's great, and in year 5, hopefully he's going to be great until he goes to Europe. And that feels like such a normal path. Very few players just come in and just star. But Ian Frey maybe was a guy that showed a few things early on, had injuries. Kramaski obviously had some things, showed things early on. But when you're talking about David Ruiz, when you're talking about Dániel Pínter and Santi Morales, what Noah Allen just went through has been a very normal progression and a very healthy progression, I think. So, A, congratulations to him on the new contract, well-deserved. B, congratulations on the interest from Europe. And I'm sure he grew up dreaming about those types of opportunities. And so if and when he pulls the trigger on going there, I'll be really happy for him. But I think he is like the perfect quintessential reminder of what it's supposed to look like. And that just because a guy has a missed touch at 19 doesn't mean he's a terrible player. It actually means like this is what it's supposed to look like, and give him another year or two and he'll be a lot better.
And sometimes the stars need to align, but that's all it's all about, right? Luck and opportunity, creating the perfect recipe for success. I also think we should give credit to someone like Tata Martino and then Javi Marciano for allowing Noah Allen to be flexible and then using him in that center-back role when they realize that he's doing really, really well. I think they didn't just pigeonhole him into that left-back role, and that allowed him to learn from Jordi Alba, develop his skill sets there, apply that to center back, and then develop as a center back as well. And I think one of the reasons we're seeing so much interest from Europe is because his versatility. He can play a couple of positions across the back line really well, and for me that goes a long way in how his development has been. So for the young players who are looking at Noah Allen, just put your head down, do the work, and the opportunities are eventually going to come. But yeah, I think you've absolutely nailed this conversation around Noah Allen.
Well, to be clear, like I think he was absolutely deserving of those the minutes 100%. He got over the last 2 years.
But not always coaches give you the minutes.
When you're talking about when he was 17 and 18,
yeah,
and Phil Neville was giving him opportunities, that is more what I think we want to see from a coach, where maybe the guy's not quite ready, but these are important minutes for his career. And that's the phase I think we're at with Dániel Pínter and some of these other guys. So, I think it's important to give him some early opportunities, even if he's not quite ready, so that he can become what he is supposed to become. Okay, let's move to another academy player, because Benjamin Kramaski was named the 2025 Young Male Player of the Year by the U.S. National Team Program, U.S. Soccer. And I think is another really important reminder that these guys take time, but that the talent is there. I will always remember Kramaski being the brightest spark when he first came through. But I think a lot of fans have been critical of him over the last couple years because he's not a finished product. But this is a reminder that like U.S. Soccer views him as one of the promising young players, most promising young players that they're producing right now. And there's a lot of guys that are owned by Chelsea and big European clubs that did not get this honor, and Benjamin Kramaski did. So, congratulations to him for this award. Still technically owned by Inter Miami. He's a guy that, like Noah Allen will soon, is going to try and prove himself in Europe and live out that dream. And again, a reminder that you want the spark, but just because you're not the finished product doesn't mean you don't and shouldn't be getting some game time to help you improve and develop as a player.
This is amazing because he's one of our own. He is the golden boy. Every single Inter Miami fan who's been here before Messi, but also during the Messi era in the last couple of years, has seen Benjamin Kramaski grow, play, contribute, score some important goals. I think he deserves every bit of success that he's getting, his move to Europe, all of that, absolutely. But I also think he's kind of fallen into a trap with Inter Miami fans of setting the benchmark so high that he now has to live up to those expectations. But also, our expectations from the talent is so high. We compare all the youngsters, everyone in the starting 11, to the likes of Messi, Sergio Busquets, Jordi Alba, and how they play. Sometimes our criticisms can be really unfair to these young players. And it just goes to show the fact that the US men's national team is recognizing him as the best young player of the year. Like, he's been brilliant at the national level. He's done some really good work with Inter Miami last year as well before heading out to Europe. And unfortunate that he didn't get the opportunities, but I think this is another one of those examples where when it's the right time, it's the right time. And if a player wants to make that leap, let him make that leap. I know there's still a lot more to come from him. Maybe there's a conversation to be had. Do we bring him back to Inter Miami? If we're looking for a central midfielder, does Benjamin Kramaski fit one of those roles as well? I love him as a player. He's fantastic, and I would want nothing more than to see him don that Inter Miami jersey once again. But if his career is outside in Europe, then I'm very happy for him as well. But more than anything, congratulations for what he's achieved and for this honor. It's brilliant, and no one can take that away from him.
Yeah, he's starting to get a couple games off the bench at Parma, so we'll see what happens with him in the summer. It's still an entire second half of the season in Italy to see what he can do there, and to see whether they're going to buy him. We could I want to talk about what it might mean to have him back in a second, but some in the chat just says he's getting no minutes at Parma, and not to infer any sort of point behind that, but it at least to me came off as like kind of dismissive. And I guess that's exactly my point, is that when you are in your first year of development, and I think we can consider Kramaski at 20 years old in his first year of development at that higher level, it's not about standing out and being a starter right away. Of course, there are some rare elite talents that do that, but for the average player, it's year 2, 3, and 4 that you really develop into like a key contributor, just like we saw with Noah Allen. And that's sort of my point is, yes, some players at 19 are fantastic, but most players, it takes them 3-4 years to really get to the level. So I have no worries about Kramaski, and I think it's great to see him be recognized by U.S. Soccer. Also a player that when he first broke on the scene, I think there was some conversation about whether he would be he would represent Argentina or the U.S. And once he chose the U.S., the sort of commitment he's made to the U.S. program as an American, I love. So, I really am happy he has gotten this recognition. Okay.
Do you think he plays and captains in the Olympics? 28. Well, I don't think he'll be able to play in the 28 Olympics. Well, he'll be 22.
I think
he'll be 22.
I think, one of the things about him going last time was that he'll be eligible to play next time. Okay. Should he come back? Worth a conversation. It's not something we've ever had. You want to talk about it? Or you want to just assume he's going to go on to bigger and better things forever.
I think we can use a minute or two just to discuss what that could look like, whether it's the right choice or not. My intuition is he shouldn't come back. I'm not sure if he's the right player and the right profile fit for a Javier Mascherano system. And I worry that if he comes back, there's going to be more frustrations and more battles for minutes for him. And I think he'll have the same frustrations at Parma, but that's a high, like that's a leap from the level that he's currently playing at. Here, he would expect to get the minutes. There, he's going to fight for the minutes. So I think if not at Parma, maybe a different European club. But I think once that he's taken that step to the next level, he should continue to develop there. I don't know if he should come to Inter Miami unless he's going to be a regular starter.
I think he would be.
He should be, but I don't know if he would be.
I think he would be. And I think Inter Miami fans will be surprised if he does come back, how much better he is. The things he's going to learn in Europe, in Italy, are, I think, going to be so good for his development, understanding his tactical structure and being really disciplined in where and when he makes his movements, understanding his movements better. That's always been a sort of a skill set of his. So to be even better and sort of more refined in his movements, I think is going to be great for him. And then the other thing is there's no way they're going to not improve his touch over a 12-month period there. Like he will be better on the ball when if he comes back than he was when he left.
Just to be clear, we're talking about bringing him back this window or in the summer once his loan expires? In the summer once his loan expires, right?
Yeah, to be clear, I don't expect him to come back. I think he'll either be bought by Parma or he'll get a move to some other team.
Yes.
But if he did end up back at Inter Miami, I think he would come in and be
100% agree.
Way better than we last saw him, and also ready to impact the team. And if I was David Ajala, I wouldn't trust my spot over Kramaski after a year at Parma, and maybe probably the same thing with Yannick Bright. So we'll see. I think he's going to be a lot better for this experience. And listen, Diego Gomez left 6 months before, and now he's killing it in the Premier League or proving himself in the Premier League. So
one of Brighton's most promising prospects at this point in time. Who would have thought that? I would have thought he wouldn't even get starter level minutes, by the way.
Well, here's the thing. Kramaski was a better player than him in 2023 and before his hernia injury and Gomez's breakout. Kramaski was outplaying Diego Gomez. So again, I wouldn't put too much shame on Kramaski's name, or you might end up eating some of those words. Anything else about the academy or any of these players coming through that you want to talk about before we move?
No, I think this is a conversation we haven't had much under Javier Mascherano. So I'm really happy that we've come to a spot where I hope some of these players coming through, some that were brought into the team a couple of years ago, have some opportunities this season. I think we spoke about the pressure being off Javier Mascherano. I hope he grows as a coach and learns to trust a lot of the players that are on the fringes of the team and give them some minutes. And by that, I mean, even if it's 5 minutes at the end of the game when we're winning, right? No need to run all your players into the ground for 90 minutes. So I think there's a lot of room for some of these players to grow this season. It will just be a matter of how much Javier Mascherano is willing to experiment and utilize his fuller squad and also see to the development of some of these players, because the club owes them as well, right? There's a responsibility towards some of these younger players, and we don't just want to have them fall by the wayside. But yeah, I think glad that Pínter has gotten this contract, is going to be brought into the first team fold. I hope Santi Morales has a few more minutes to prove what he's worth, and the same with Tyler Hall, Israel Boatwright. So we'll see. A lot of talent here.
Yeah, last thing I want to say, Pepto says in the chat, Miami's not a developmental club. They're not in their developmental club era. Yeah. This is a win now era. Couldn't understand. Can you explain to me what that implies?
I think it means,
does PSG not bring players through? Does Barcelona not bring players through? Does Man City not bring players through? Does Chelsea not bring players through?
Yes, but those clubs are established winning clubs. Inter Miami is just getting into that. I think you mentioned this, right? Bringing in talent into the first team is the most conducive when it's a winning mentality in the club, when the vibes are high, when the club has established that winning setup and culture. I don't necessarily agree with Pep's point here that Inter Miami is not a developmental club. I think a healthy club, a good club, finds a balance between the two. But I understand the point he's trying to get at. For Inter Miami, when you're trying to win that trophy, right, you're not going to rely on these young players. So if you're in a difficult situation, like we were for large parts of the regular season, when Inter Miami went on a 10-game losing/drawing streak, you're not going to bring in some of these young players into the fold. You're going to continue to rely on your talent to get you out of the mess. But when you're a winning team, when you don't necessarily have that pressure to constantly win every single game, when you have that balance between experience and youth and talent, that's when I think it's the most conducive for some of these young players to develop. So I think Inter Miami is moving towards that. Are we there yet? Maybe. We'll see. I think it depends on the coach and how they treat it. But I can understand Pep's sentiment in this regard.
And I don't mean to pick on Pep because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are thinking the same thing. I don't really understand that thinking, or at least maybe I just don't agree with that thinking, because in the MLS, each point doesn't matter. You got to make the playoffs and then get hot. And so there's so many games in the regular season that are less consequential, that are perfect opportunities for Inter Miami to get more kids opportunities to play. And then when they get opportunities to play, and if they prove themselves, like Inter Miami has seen over and over and over and over and over again in their young history, all of a sudden you have a great roster value somewhere on your roster. You have a great value for the quality you're getting. And then also if you sell them on, you make some profit, which is what Inter Miami's been able to do as well. So I guess if you're in the Premier League and you're fighting against relegation, or if you're fighting to win the Premier League and every point might matter, or La Liga or whatever, I get it, because maybe a kid will turn a win into a draw or a draw into a loss or whatever. But I think in this league where the points aren't quite as crucial, I think it's even more relevant to give your kids opportunities. And even in this league where you're in a cap situation where having value for your roster is important, and these kids are on your supplemental roster, I think it's even more important. And then also, let's finish on this. Dániel Pínter, congratulations. First team Inter Miami player. He wore 56 last year. I think he'll probably get a new number with the new contract. What do you think?
Has anyone taken 19 yet? He's probably going to have a 9 in his number. Should have, if he's going to be a striker for this team. Or a swinger. We'll see.
Swinger. Should we just update on the Tristan Blackman situation? Last time we spoke, he posted a picture of palm trees, and everyone took that to mean he wants to go to South Florida, including Michelle Kaufman, who is the only reason I still think this is possible, because she's sticking with her guns. And so, again, take that for what it's worth. The next day, he did not show up for Vancouver's medical when he was supposed to. So that was a whole thing, and they're trying to sign him to a new contract, and that hasn't been agreed upon yet. And the next day, he did show up for medicals and was going to get on the plane for their preseason tour, I think is in Spain maybe. So where are we at with Tristan Blackman, the drama?
I still think he's coming. I think it's going to take some time, perhaps, because we talked about this last episode. It's not as urgent to make this happen since we already have Mikael, Maxi Falcone, Noah Allen, those positions. So we should be okay. But I do think he's going to come.
I guess I'll just stick with my skepticism on this, but it'd be really
Sure.
cool. I will mention a couple days ago, there was a guy from Colombia, but he's playing in Argentina named, and I'm apologizing if I butcher this, Johan Romana, who plays for San Lorenzo, which is the same club that Gonzalo Lujan came from, which did give me a little bit of a nightmare, but apparently he is much better than Gonzalo Lujan and is valued much higher. Apparently that's not true. And so if you thought, okay, maybe Inter Miami's pivoting off Tristan Blackman and looking at other center back options, I don't think that's the case. That felt more like San Lorenzo's trying to move him on and get a higher price, and they want Inter Miami's name to be involved to help attract interest. So we can throw that name out the window and I guess stay on Tristan Blackman watch. Are we going to spend 5 minutes of every episode talking about Tristan Blackman?
I think that's the right thing to do. We call that section the what do we call that section? The Blackman watch section or something like that. We can come up with something more creative, I'm sure.
The swinger and center back section.
Maybe we can have a game this season in the pre-game show. We call it the swinger or the striker. We're getting silly again.
All right, let's end it there, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be back maybe tomorrow because Tristan Blackman's going to sign with Inter Miami. But actually, the real thing is I think they're leaving for their preseason tour in Spain, which actually probably means there's nothing related to Tristan Blackman until they come back. Because I don't think he's going to leave the tour halfway through. That just feels like bad timing. So maybe we can put the Tristan Blackman section on hold for a while, actually. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this and have a wonderful day.